As you know, I come to Washington, D.C. regularly, and we were just talking about crime here again. Again, 24 murders. That's the last update I had. Over 110 days, beginning the 11th of August. If you extrapolate that out, that is a murder rate of about 80 annually. That would be the lowest in 40 years. Carjacking's down 75%. Sexual assault down 35%. The positive outcome from the National Guard, just strolling the streets, has been remarkable, but then two get gunned down. One's dead, one in terrible shape, critical condition. Joining me now is Jody Weis, the former superintendent of the Chicago Police Department. Jody, thank you for being here.
Yeah, good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me.
I mean, the results, I come to D.C. regularly. I'm here today. And as my previous guest just mentioned, the Navy Yard, never been safer. Walking around D.C., never been safer. Not in my lifetime. And yet everybody wants to demonize, everybody on the left, I should be clear, wants to demonize the National Guard being here as if it's some sort of threat. You know what I see? I see people talking to the National Guard. They're talking, they're chatting, they're laughing. Everybody's getting along, and crime is going down. Am I missing something?
No, Steve, you're spot on. You've just got a group of politicians and media that are so against anything Trump does. If you just look at the facts, as you just articulated, there's great results in D.C. I spent a lot of time in D.C. I would love to have had the National Guard standing around there. If you go to New York right after 9/11, the National Guard was everywhere. So I think you just have to come to the realization that some people, no matter what Trump does, it doesn't matter. They're just going to hate him for it. But the results have been incredible. And look what the National Guard can do. They can act as a deterrent. If there's a high crime area, you put a squad there. You give them the right rules of engagement. You give them the right mission. And that'll keep the bad guys out of that area. And you can displace that crime. And when they work with the police department and work with federal agencies, you have a very potent force. And I think the biggest attribute to all of that was the mayor. Certainly not a fan of Donald Trump, but when she comes out and says D.C. is safer today because of the National Guard, that says something to me.
Absolutely true. But the National Guard gets demonized, and then a guy drives all the way across the country from the state of Washington and shoots them down. There's a problem there. You go to Chicago. You look at the mayor there, Brandon Johnson, and the governor, J.B. Pritzker. We don't want the National Guard here. Of course, why would you want that? There have only been 2,000 people shot in Chicago so far this year, a few hundred murders. Why would you want to lower your crime rate? Why not just demonize Donald Trump, tell the world how wonderful Chicago is as mobs of people in their teen years are taking over the Miracle Mile? I mean, it's absolutely absurd. It's obscene. Look, the people that can't leave these neighborhoods, the people that are retired on fixed incomes, that are stuck in places that aren't great in Chicago or D.C., they're the ones paying the highest price, aren't they?
100%. And let's ask ourselves, Steve, why don't these politicians want to have the National Guard here? I've been scratching my head on that ever since this came about. And the only idea I can even have, true or not, is that they would be embarrassed. They would then be told, people of Chicago would be shown that if the politicians are willing to attack this problem, it can be solved. Can you imagine how Pritzker and Johnson would look if Trump sent in the National Guard and got the same type of statistical results, achievements that he got in D.C.? People in Chicago would be going like, why didn't this happen like 20 years ago? And if I was still superintendent, I would love to have the National Guard in there. Working with them, you could do so much work to shut down some of the high crime areas, the open air drug markets. You can immediately have the capability to move resources around to address a crime that might be ready to break off, depending on who just came out of prison. It gives the law enforcement folks so much opportunity. But you know, Steve, the problem I think in Chicago are the judges. There's a new state's attorney there who's trying to do the right thing. But look at that psychopath they left loose after 72 arrests who tried to burn someone to death on a CTA train. How can that possibly happen? And the judge's comment, well, I can't lock up everybody the state's attorney wants me to. What an indictment that is. That judge has blood all over her hands.
Right. It was a horrible comment. But you look at people in Chicagoland, Humboldt Park, Garfield Park, Little Village, Englewood, Auburn, Gresham, Chatham, those places that are overrun with shootings and homicides. Like I said, almost 2,000 people shot in Chicago so far, more than 400 shot and killed in Chicago so far this year. And they're apparently perfectly okay with it. You know what they want? They want more gun control laws, which have no impact at all on these gangs and these drug shootings and these, mass shootings. Funny that the left always wants to talk about mass shootings. there have been a couple dozen so-called mass shootings in the city of Chicago this year alone. Have you heard about any one of them? No, of course not.
Of course
It's a
not.
double standard, isn't it?
Absolutely. It all depends who's being shot and who's shooting them. You know, if it fits the narrative that the police are bad, then of course we're going to hear that all day long. But, you know, you go back to the George Floyd days, something horrible, far worse than what happened to George Floyd, literally happens every weekend in Chicago. Half a dozen black men are usually killed every weekend in Chicago, as sad as that sounds. And what do you hear out of there? Crickets. How many activists go to Chicago in support of that to try to make a difference? Zero. But you have one police officer who, you know, ends up taking the life of a criminal, a career criminal, and all hell breaks loose, and the entire country is up in flames.
Yeah, you know, I had to update my statistic here. I went to heyjackass.com, my favorite place
Great
to keep track of
website, isn't
Chicago
it?
shootings. Yeah, 30 plus mass shootings, and I'm counting 3 or more. If you had just 2 shot, that would make it over 100. Yeah, heyjackass.com. If you ever want to know what's going on in Chicagoland when it comes to shootings and violent crime, that is a great website. There's no question about it. I'll give you the last word.
No, I just feel really sorry for the police officers who are trying to do a good job every day. I feel very sorry for the residents of Chicago because they're faced with a broken political system. You've got a mayor who
Yeah.
cares nothing about the people. Every word out of his mouth is racism, racism, racism. Well, all the poor people in Chicago who can't leave, who are locked into that city, have to suffer through this guy's incompetent methodology. And the police officers are out there banging their heads, trying to do a good job. I'm very happy finally that we now have a state's attorney that's trying to lock people up. But until these judges are held accountable, and they've got to be held accountable, nothing's really going to change. So let's pray for
That's
2026 being a better year in Chicago.
I agree with you. Jody Weis, thank you for being here.
Yes, sir. Have a good day.
There you have it. The National Guard is it's a tested tool that has worked in D.C. Chicago, wake up. We'll have sports with Brock after the break.